Welcome, everyone. My name is Ian Winbrock, and I'm the chair of the Whitaker Community Council, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to our virtual room for our February 2022 general meeting. I'm going to run through just a couple of quick slides before we get started, which explains the organization, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Right after that, we're going to jump into public comment. And then after that, we're going to welcome our speaker this evening, which is City of Eugene Police Chief Eugene Skinner. Can everyone see the slides in the upper right-hand corner? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up from Duncan. I'm assuming Duncan isn't leading me astray. And like I said, this is the February 2022 general meeting. And I first wanted to start out with, who are we? Well, we're your neighbors. That's to say, if you live in the Whitaker, we're your neighbors. And here's some pictures of us. And these folks in the foreground are a couple of folks who are not only your neighbors, but they're actually on the board of directors for the Whitaker Community Council, which serves as both your neighborhood association in accordance with the bylaws of the City of Eugene, where we have some select functions serving as an advisory capacity to the city on issues ranging from planning to transportation, public art to public safety. And in the background of that image, you can see some of the Whitaker neighbors as well, Akon and Gloria Udasenko, who own Equiano Coffee. And actually, they are part of an ongoing public health campaign that we have to reduce COVID-19 infection and transmission, not just in the Whitaker, but folks who are visiting to the Whitaker as well. And I'll explain why we do that in just a second. So what do we do? Well, we help our neighbors out. And we do this through a couple of different ways. Our public health and safety campaign has provided over 2,000 masks to our community and over 1,100 vaccinations through our free wellness clinics, which happen once a month, where we do STI testing, COVID testing, and provide free food and safety materials, PPE to community members, as well as over 200 rapid COVID tests and hundreds of gallons of hand sanitizers to local businesses, like you can see in that picture in the right. Our social justice committee has provided over 1,000 gallons of water to our unhoused community members, some of whom are living at Washington Jefferson Park, like you can see in that picture. Our transportation committee is in the process of providing more than 200 traffic slowing signs to members of the community through our wellness clinics. You can see a really cute one of a tortoise covered in snails, just to remind folks, hey, slow down. So you'll see those yard signs, not just in the Whitaker, but around the community as well. Our art committee, the Whitaker Community Art Team, has provided more than $10,000 in funding in this last year alone to local artists like those go-go dancers you can see in the picture there, as well as put a bunch of cool art in the neighborhood, and we're in the process of putting up more. We have traffic murals going in at intersections and crosswalks. They're going to be designed by local muralists, as well as a freestanding art wall, which is going to be coming up in at least early March, so that community members can have a place to do sanctioned graffiti and talk about the issues of the day through public art. But one of our most kind of closest places to our collective hearts is that we've helped our business community. And just the last year alone, we've given out more than $50,000 of grant funding from Oregon Health Authority, as well as Lane County Public Health, to businesses all over the Whitaker. And this is just a few of them. And we do this not only to enfranchise our community economically, but because we want to keep as much of the funding that we receive through federal or state or local sources back in the community that we live. So what are our committees? Well, they're the groups that help make stuff happen. Right now we have 4 active communities, and anyone who's a part of this call can join them. We've got our public health and safety committee led by Anand, who's one of our longstanding board members, and is also a volunteer with Occupy Medical and a public health nurse with Lane County Public Health. Our social justice committee that's given out PPE as well as water and food to some of our most vulnerable community members who are unhoused. Our Whitaker Community Art Team, which has members from all over Lane County, and we work together to make the arts community in the Whitaker more vibrant and equitable. And our transportation committee that works on issues ranging from traffic slowing signs to public art intersections to making sure that our railroad crossings are safe and that we have equitable transportation options for everyone. So get involved. Just by showing up tonight, it shows your interest and your passion to be a part of our community. And we would love for you to join us even further by joining one of our committees. And if you have any questions about our committees or how to get involved, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of our other board members who might be speaking throughout the evening. So tonight's agenda isn't a super long one. We've got public comment coming up next, and I'll be passing it on to our Vice Chair, Gail Caru-Vetter, to be able to do the facilitation for our public comment. We're going to have a question and answer session with City of Eugene Police Chief Chris Skinner, and then we're going to have a conversation on how to be able to have COVID-19 safe Whitaker Community Council meetings, either in a hybrid format or an in-person format in the coming months. So now that we've gone through the agenda, I wanted to talk about some ways for how you can participate in tonight's meeting. So Claire, our board secretary, may reach out to you via the Zoom chat and ask your address. She's doing this because she wants to be able to understand if you live within the boundaries of the Whitaker or not. We're going to be the ones who determine that with the city. And if you do live in the Whitaker, guess what? You can now vote and actually run in our elections for the board. Please mute yourself unless you're talking. There is a queue to speak. It's first come, first served. And the queue will be managed by myself for the public comment section, as well as when we have Eugene Chief of Police Chris Skinner. Non-board members talk first. So board members, we're respectful and deferential to folks who are not on the board, and we want to make sure that your comments, concerns, and questions rise to the top. In addition to that, there's 4 different ways you can voice your interest in participating: by raising your physical hand, by raising your hand in Zoom. Thanks for showing us, Gail. By typing into the Zoom chat that you have an interest in participating, or if you're calling over the phone, you can just merely say your name. I'll pick on Duncan because I can see him right now. If Duncan was calling on the phone, he would just say Duncan, and that would be his way of expressing his interest in participating. And like I said, both during the public comment period, as well as during the Q&A with the chief, I'll be facilitating via the Zoom chat the queue, and Gail is going to be facilitating the public comment speaking order. She's going to be moderating that portion, and then we'll be passing it over to Thea Lee, who will be moderating the Q&A with the police chief. But before we get started with public comment, does anyone have any questions about the ways that people can voice their interest in participating? All right, great. So because I am not seeing anyone who has any questions about ways to participate, I'm going to pass it over to our Vice Chair, Gail, who's going to moderate the public comment. And if anyone has anything during public comment, please raise your hand, or raise your virtual hand, or throw a question into the Zoom chat, and I'll add you to the queue. Gail?
Thank you, Ian. So we're looking to see if there's anybody who has any questions or any comments during our public comment period. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have anything to add.
Gail, it looks like we have Kevin first and Travis second, and I will put the queue into the Zoom chat.
Thank you, Ian. Kevin, you're first. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Cronin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an organizer for the campaign to pass PERT and DPA. PERT is Protecting Eugene Renters in Transition, and DPA is Displacement Prevention Assistance. Essentially, it's a slate of tenant protections that has been proposed by the Housing Policy Board to the Eugene City Council for adoption. Sometime back in 2018, we had a town hall with the Whitaker Community Council. We collected a lot of input on what sort of tenant protections we were looking for. And now we're actually scheduled for a work session on March 16th at the City Council. So I'm hoping that if you're a tenant, or if you're a homeowner or a landlord that is friendly to tenants, that you would get involved in our campaign and speak up in favor of these protections. I have a sign-up sheet that I'm going to put into the chat as a way that you can sign up and give me your contact information so I can get you more involved in the campaign. There's going to be 3 opportunities to speak ahead of this work session. One is this Monday night, the 14th. One is 2 weeks from then on the 28th, and then another opportunity on March 14th, which is also a Monday at 7:30 at the City Council. So love to have you involved in the campaign, and thanks so much for inviting me, Ian.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That sounds very interesting. And Kevin has put the contact form into the chat, so anyone who's interested in that can take that from the chat. Next up, we have Travis Knudsen. Travis, go ahead.
Hello, I'll start off just by introducing myself. My name is Travis Knudsen. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. I am here today. I emailed Ian about this earlier, but I also wanted to join the evening today to ask, I guess, inquire to the community here if there would be interest in LRAPA attending one of these meetings in the future to give a presentation on a facility that will be setting up manufacturing close to the Whitaker neighborhood. Archimoto, which is a EV manufacturer. They have submitted an application to the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency for beginning manufacturing of these EVs, and they are moving through the Cleaner Oregon program, which is a new program in the state of Oregon that LRAPA does administer for Lane County that looks at the emissions from facilities and does a health risk assessment of who might be exposed to air emissions and what the potential health risk might be from that exposure. And we are looking to see if there's community interest for community engagement on this application that we have received. I emailed Ian about this, and I just wanted to join here to offer to engage community interest in participating or showing up at one of these meetings in the future to answer questions on this and give information on what the facility would be doing and what that health risk assessment is. So we just wanted to join and try to gauge interest. And if there is an interest, then happy to work here with everybody and facilitate a meeting to share that information and take those questions. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Travis. Ian, have you made a note? I'm sure you have. Okay, are there any other questions or comments during our public? I see Alberto. Go ahead, Alberto.
Yeah. So my name is Alberto Lopez Romero. I'm a certified alcohol and drug counselor over at Central Latino Americano in the Whitaker area. And so I'm here to speak, well, not only because I'm a U of O student as well, and we also have other U of O students here who are just kind of curious in this group, on these group dynamics. And so it seems like, well, one question I always had that made me kind of curious. So to be a part of these meetings, one necessarily has to just be living in the area. That was my question.
The requirements anyone can attend the meetings. These are public meetings, so everyone is welcome to attend. In order to participate in the Whitaker Community Council, to run for the board, to vote on things, you need to either live, work, or own property within the boundaries of the Whitaker. And so Claire is requesting that everyone who's here go ahead and let her know where they are, so we can keep a list of the people who are Whitaker residents or business owners or property owners, so that we make sure that we only allow the eligible folks to vote or do other council-y sorts of things. But you are always welcome. Everyone is always welcome to attend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just wanted to give a shameless plug. Some of our most active members of committees are folks who not only don't live in the Whitaker, but actually don't live in Eugene. We have longstanding members of the Whitaker Community Art Team, our arts committee, that does loads of projects in the Whitaker, brings in hundreds, and as you saw, thousands of dollars to Whitaker artists, and they don't live in the Whitaker either. So there's ample opportunities for folks to come on in. Kevin is Whitaker adjacent. He definitely embodies the spirit of the Whitaker. But yeah, we invite folks from the community at large to come and provide testimony or be able to share with us issues that we think are pertinent, just like Travis did with the Lane Regional Air Quality Protection Board. I probably got it a little wrong towards the end, LRAPA. I don't think it ends with a B. But yeah, great question, Alberto. And if anyone else has questions regarding the board that they have popping up after public comment, feel free to message Gail or myself or any other board member, and we'll follow up with you via email.
Thank you very much. Ian, does anyone else have anything they'd like to say during this public comment period, including board members who are present? Okay, I don't see any other public comments. So Ian, I'm gonna send it back to you for the next portion.
Great. I just wanted to check in and see if Police Chief Skinner was in the house yet. I see Chris's iPhone. It looks like the chief is here. So Chief, I'm gonna pass it on to Thea for your introduction, and she's also gonna be moderating the question and answer session. Thea? Looks like Thea's building the suspense as she moves her computer from one area to another. So if anyone has a drum kit and wants to start drumming, please do so now.
All right, guys, my internet just decided not to work for the first time all day today. Do we have Chief Skinner on, Ian? Okay, great. So as Ian said, I'm Thea. I've been in the Whitaker for, I don't know, 27 years now or so. And Whitaker Community Council has been working with EPD and myself specifically for the last several years, trying to keep our streets safe for our housed or unhoused and our businesses so that we can.
We lost you there, Thea.
Oh, looks like we lost Thea and we almost lost me. So I'll carry the baton from
EPD.
Oh, hey Thea, I think we lost you there for a second. Where we lost you
I'm gonna
was
go upstairs. So give me a second, guys.
all right.
I apologize.
Nope, no apologies needed.
I'll be right next to my router and then I won't have an issue. I don't end up down the stairs. Okay. Can you still hear me, Ian?
Yes, absolutely. It looks like the
Okay.
most riveting edition of Cribs.
Did you like that? Did
I
I make
did.
anybody sick to their stomach? Anyway, we've asked Chief Skinner. This is about his 4th time coming to the Community Council, and people have sent in questions. He's going to try to answer as many of those as possible, and he's going to let us know how EPD and the city will be moving forward, because we have a lot of people that are preying on our unhoused, our housed, and our businesses, and we need to all be a little bit safer. And Ian's going to keep track of who the speaking order is, and I will call on people. And if you can keep it to 2 minutes, that would be great. And we'll see if we can get as many questions as possible answered. So Chief Skinner, you are up. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Thea. I always enjoy being available to come and chat with you. I will tell you that I do appreciate the questions ahead of time. It gives me a chance to kind of frame where I want to go with some of these discussions. And I just thought I would say that, you know, I don't mind really tough and pointed questions like I have in here. Thea gave me kind of the unedited version of some of your comments, and there was a brief moment of time that I wondered whether or not I wanted to be a part of this meeting, quite frankly, just because a couple of comments I thought were a little bit out of bounds and lacked a little bit of respect for my role in safety. And so I would just ask in the future that maybe you take that into consideration when you're reaching out and communicating with me. So I'm going to go through some of these questions, and some of these I'm going to be able to answer, and some of these, quite honestly, just trying to unpack those answers would be like an hour-long conversation, just because they're so complex and there's just so many moving parts to that. So let me do my very best to try and go through these. And I have no idea whose questions these are, if they're all from one person. And then I've got a 1.5 page multiple paragraph kind of question / idea editorial comment type section, and I'll try to address some of those if I can for that individual that submitted those. So one of the questions that was asked that I think is really important is and I won't read it verbatim, but I'll just tell you, it centered around the community safety initiative, which is commonly known as the payroll tax, and asking just very and legitimately asking, what are we getting for our tax dollars? Man, that's a legitimate question. And for those of us that pay that tax, me included, and all of my employees that work at EPD paying that tax, they want the same answers and have the same questions. One of the things I think is important to remember is that the payroll taxes we've been collecting for only a year now. So we started collecting those in January of 2021. So we just finished our first year of collection, and it took us about 4 to 6 months to really understand what the collection rate was going to look like during our COVID times. Pre-COVID, we kind of had some projections on what we thought we would collect, and then COVID hit, and there was an awful lot of available payroll that went down, and businesses struggled, and so we were kind of waiting to see what we were going to collect before we started investing those dollars. But the first full year of collection of those payroll dollars was intended to pay back an existing loan that we had taken out on the general fund to do some things in the early stages of the community safety initiative. And those things were a 10-person street crimes team to try to deal with some of the street level criminal activity that we have, as many as 5 community service officers to help try and answer some of the lower acuity calls for service and those calls for service that have a tendency to sit unanswered for way too long. And then a couple of different positions in dispatch to try and give us more dispatchers so that we could give those folks some help there. And so we did that early on, and that cost us out of an interfund loan to our general fund and our fleet fund to be able to do that. And so government finance requires that we pay that back by the end of the following fiscal year. And so while all that work was being done in the 2020 fiscal year, which is 2019 into 2020, then we needed to get that paid back by the end of the 21 fiscal year. And so those early payroll collections in 2021 were being paid for that. And so there is a significant number of staff that we have added that I think is helpful. You may have seen as early as today a media thing that I did around downtown safety and some things we're doing around the downtown and trying to pay a little bit more attention to downtown safety. And our street crimes team has been a part of that. And Thea and I have talked on many occasions around street crimes, paying attention to drop shots and human trafficking, and trying to do some stuff in and around WJ, as well as throughout the city. They've shut down a ton of problem houses. They had the largest single methamphetamine seizure in the state of Oregon history, with 384 pounds of methamphetamine in cooperation with the DEA. And so there's some really good work that's being done, but that's kind of how some of those payroll tax dollars are being spent to date. As we move forward, we have a very comprehensive plan of how we further invest those dollars to add a variety of things to our response. One of those is to add a significant amount of community service officers to build an alternate response for our patrol staff, free patrol officers up and our police officers up to respond to what police officers should be going to, and allowing our CSOs on a 24/7 schedule, which has never happened before, to try and get to the other needs of the community in a much more timely fashion. And I think that will feel better. And so we have just a whole variety of strategies around the community safety initiative we could spend a lot of time talking about and getting into, but that's one of some of the stuff that how we're utilizing that payroll tax. So I wanted to answer that question. Let me pick off a couple of these others. I'll just go down this list because I don't know if this is one person or if this is a accumulation of a bunch of questions. No camping signs like the one on North Polk Street. I don't know, have the answer to that. My guess is that transportation within the city is the one that generates signs and determines how they are put up. I do know that for signs to be enforceable, there's generally a process that's involved, and we erect those signs and can articulate where they're at. But quite honestly, right now, I think we can all agree that any no camping sign doesn't have a lot of teeth. And we've largely been allowing people to shelter in place when it's not on private property and we don't have a victim of trespass. And we're thinking about how we're going to do that differently in the coming months. And we're really looking forward to standing up for Tent Garfield, which will be the safe sleep tent camping site, which I think will positively impact that Washington Jefferson area and hopefully the entire Whitaker area when we stand up those safe sleep sites. And so I know that we're talking about that in the not so distant future to do that. We actually have a timeline for that, that we're going to be communicating with council pretty soon around that strategy. And so we're looking forward to some positive movement there. The question, I'll just read it verbatim just so you know that I'm not editing anything. I saw you gassing journalists and I saw you settle those ACLU lawsuits. How much has EPD cost taxpayers in civil suits in the last 5 years? I don't have the answer on the total number of amount of money. What I will tell you is that as a self-insured city, you know, anytime we have one of these lawsuits, we do a what I believe to be a very good job of understanding what the potential outcomes are, and we certainly enter into mediation with those people where warranted, and then certainly do our work to get summary judgment in the other areas. At least in the early stages of my tenure here, which will be 4 years come April, we have settled some lower number financial dollar numbers out of the most recent protests and some of the action that we had in post May 29th, 2020 and into the summer. We had a few lawsuits come out of that, and I know that those have been settled. I don't know the total number of those. It's not a big number. I think sometimes what happens is we see some of the publication around some of our neighboring cities or neighboring jurisdictions that have settled, you know, massive amounts of lawsuits, and the assumption may be that we're all in that same posture, and that's just not the case for Eugene. But we have settled some, but the dollar amount is fairly negligible in the grand scheme of things. That being said, it is taxpayer dollars, and I'm mindful of that. And I know that I would like to be able to say that we paid zero money out, but that's just not the case. And the use of chemical munitions through the protests have been reevaluated, and we made some adjustments to policy, and we learned a lot through that time, and have made some adjustments and listened and heard people when it comes to that. And journalists being embedded with general protesters did happen, but at no time did we purposefully gas journalists as a singular group. So I just wanted to point that out. What are your working conditions for staff at EPD, including dispatch and cahoots? And I can only guess maybe what you're asking around the working conditions. I think, it's been a heavy couple of years for all of us, because you think about everything that we're trying to do to keep ourselves and families safe, and keep and stay employed for some people. I heard one of your speakers talk about protection for renters and just the importance of those types of things. I would just say that the working conditions are heavy for people, and both personally and professionally, like all of us are. And we are committed and dedicated to investing in our people and their wellness, because we recognize that if our dispatchers and our EPD staff are not emotionally, mentally, physically well, then they don't make great decisions out on the street. They don't make great decisions when they're responding to calls. And it's really important to us for them to be in a place where they're making the very best decisions. What we've learned is that empathy is as a key component to how we want to deliver service. And we also know that empathy has a tendency to erode when you're under a ton of stress and you're struggling with a variety of things. You have a tendency to be short with people and have less empathy, and we have to pay attention to that. Cahoots is the same thing. They're understaffed as we are. They have calls that are holding way longer than they want them to be, as we do. They would love nothing more than to be able to recruit and retain the amount of staff needed to be able to think about growth, just like we would. And yet any of us that are on this call that are involved in hiring and or recruiting understand that it's as difficult as it's ever been to find good quality candidates that are willing to raise their hand and say, choose me. And so we continue to work on that and continue to want to be a good partner with Cahoots to work on that. And as we're having conversations, it's just funny because I just had an email from Chris Heck from Whitebird. We're getting together with he and I and Sarah Madera are getting together here shortly, and we're talking about kind of next steps for Cahoots. So I think that's encouraging.
Chief Skinner, can you take
Yeah.
a question from some of our audience members, and then we'll get back to some of the questions that are
Sure.
there?
Yeah,
Okay.
just you drive this thing, Thea. You know you can
Okay.
interrupt me.
All right. Well, I did. So let's hear one from Brad. He's in the first order. We have Brad and Stephen, then Travis for now. So,
Hi, Chief. Since you took over as our chief, we've had we've passed Vision Zero in the city, and yet we've had a doubling of the fatalities of people not in cars on our streets. And I get that a lot of other things have happened, including just before that, before you got here, Officer Kilcullen being murdered doing a traffic stop, which didn't exactly raise the enthusiasm of police officers for doing those things. But Oregon's revised statutes allow for the public to do traffic citations, and but it requires the assistance of the police department. Would you be willing to dedicate resources to an enthusiastic public that wants to clean up our streets a bit? Cars are going 50 and 30s, cars are going 40 and 20s. Nobody's stopping at stop signs. People drive willy-nilly in the bike lanes. We got a problem on our streets. Would you be willing to help with that?
Well, I'm always willing to help. And I'm also, it's important to think about a purposeful and intentional program around and the unintended consequences of getting that very enthusiastic public more engaged. We have to think about capacity, not only with our police officers that have to help issue the citation on your behalf. We also have to think about the court system that would be receiving those citations, and ultimately make sure the public understands that part of the remedy is that they come and actually testify in court against the offender, and that the public has to be able to establish probable cause in those issues, and the public doesn't have necessarily the same technology as we have to be able to help do that. So there's a few moving parts to that. I've been a part of several instances where we have helped facilitate a citizen member issue a citation, and so I know it can be done, and in some cases maybe should be done. But I would be willing to at least sit down and talk about what that kind of a pilot program might look like, since we're talking about so many other resources that I can't commit. I can't commit resource, like for instance, court resources. I can't commit prosecutor resources. I would have to check with them and see whether or not they could absorb the volume that this might generate. So
I guess you get to deputize Brad. Next on the list is Stephen.
Chief Skinner, thanks for coming back to talk with us this evening. It's always good to see you. Apologies if I've asked this question on one of your previous visits. I've been a long-time member of the ACLU, and one of my concerns is privacy, which is probably in common with many other people in our neighborhood. Does EPD, I was going to ask about two technologies. One is drones, and the other is facial recognition technology.
Mm-hmm.
Have you in the past used either of these two technologies? Are you using them now, or do you have plans to use them in the future? So it's facial recognition technology and drones.
yeah, thank you for the question, Stephen. I appreciate that. So facial recognition is an easy answer. The answer is no. We have no technology that leverages facial recognition, and don't have any plans in the future to leverage facial recognition. There's plenty of research where that type of technology makes perfect sense, but I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense in community policing. Secondly, the drone program is an up and running, a very robust program. And drones only get flown under certain circumstances. In one circumstance, it's when a crime has occurred, and we're using those to help abate that crime, or in the investigation phase of that crime. Or monitoring potential criminal behavior. The other one is mostly, the other two would be search and rescue types of operations in the event that we need to run up and down the Willamette Riverbank or rivers that make perfect sense to fly. And then the other one is to map crime scenes. Where we have crime scenes, we can put our drones up on a pre-programmed grid pattern, so to speak, and it flies up and down and maps our crime scenes for us. And so those are really the three primary areas that we would use drones.
Thanks so much.
Mhm.
And Travis, you're up next.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Travis.
Yeah, I can
Hi.
hear you, Travis.
Hi, Chief. First of all, thanks for coming. I apologize for people's rude behavior in some of the emails I received. I'd like to start off by saying a shout out to Officer Cardwell, who I have seen multiple times throughout the neighborhood, getting stolen property back from community members and being very professional with not only the victims of that crime, but also with the perpetrators of the crime. I think she's all around a great cop. And I think that if you have someone that you can move up, she'd definitely be my candidate. Every other officer I've come in contact with in the Whitaker in the past year and a half, which have been many, have acted in professional ways. And I thank you for that change in how I view the police in Eugene. My question is, are you aware of the social service organizations CORE and Black Thistle Street Aid, among other third-party organizations that are distributing harm reduction kits that include multiple kinds of glass dope pipes and bags of syringes to the area youth in our parks? Also, what is your opinion about this? And what is your understanding regarding the legality of the distribution of drug paraphernalia to our area's youth in our parks?
Wow, what a great question. First of all, thank you for the acknowledgement around, especially Officer Cardwell. Kirsten's a great addition to the team, and we've actually centered some of our recruiting videos just around the work that she's doing. And so she is a shining star for us. And so, thanks to her and the other officers that are doing a great job. I am familiar with at least Black Thistle, not personally. I've not had conversations with them. So the information that you're sharing with me is new information. My park officers might have a better sense of what's happening, but I have seen some of the activism that they're involved in from time to time, and some of the activities that they take on. The distribution of drug paraphernalia is a tricky one in the sense that Measure 110, which decriminalized the use of a lot of these drugs, certainly doesn't apply to minors, but really has created an environment for us where we think about, okay, where should we be spending our time? And it really has not forced us, but we've chosen to kind of step away from some of those drug-related crimes and the ancillary crimes around drug paraphernalia in an effort to try and focus in other areas that actually are crimes or are criminal behavior. That we see that play out every single day when you think about Measure 110 and what it was intended to do, which is to get more people in treatment as a result of enforcement action. I'm not sure that's happening, and I've got some interesting statistics around that might be for another conversation. But I would have to do a little bit of looking around kind of the purposeful distribution by some of those social service groups and their target audiences, and potentially maybe get back to you either via email or through Thea or Ian, and just get an opportunity to do a follow up with you on that.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Alberto, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, Chief Skinner. Thank you so much for your guys' service. I know that you guys help out a lot in the community, and as somebody who used to work in the Silvering area over at the Whitaker, side, I had a lot of help from police, working at Buckley House, so I always appreciated that. Has there been a lot of new training for communication, especially with those who have been unhoused and in rough situations, especially during the winter, for those who are struggling with substance abuse? Has there been a lot more training or collaborations with cahoots and training with police officers since the uprising in that?
Yeah, Alberto, thanks for the question. And I love the fact that you're engaged. And so I'm happy to always connect with you even offline if you have some more questions. But let me just answer it this way. I'm not sure I could point to like specific training that's involved with those particular groups. But what I would tell you is that I have purposefully tried to move law enforcement away from being the first touch with those groups. If you think about things that you can do to create less conflict between our groups that are either suffering from substance addiction or behavioral health issues, mental health issues, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the right resources go into the right need. And some of the needs that those folks have are not necessarily law enforcement needs. And this isn't anybody's fault other than the fact that we can point to several systems in our society that have failed these people before they land on our doorstep. And we have a tendency also over the years and decades, and I'm finishing or into my 32nd year of being in this profession, is that law enforcement and fire and EMS to a certain extent have a tendency to be kind of the catch basin for everything else that falls through the cracks. And what we need to think about doing is getting law enforcement out of that business and getting the right resource to that right need. Cahoots is an example of a right resource. There's other alternative responses that will be the right resources for some of those needs. So it's not like it's more training for us in how to deal with those. It's actually pulling us back. And really the only time we should be dealing with things, quite honestly, is if there's a safety component or a criminal component to things. That's what you should expect your police officers to be really good at, is keeping you safe in a moment of crisis and doing a good job of investigating criminal behavior to hold people accountable. And we need to start thinking about what resources need to be front facing and be really those first responders to behavioral health crisis, to include those that are unsheltered and others. And so that's kind of the strategy behind that. Instead of asking them to continue to do what they're doing and just train them more, it's actually, let's think about where the training makes sense and pull them back from being the first touch with those individuals.
Thank you so much for addressing the question. And one more quick thing, as an addictions counselor myself, and it works for a company that has been granted some funds for measurable intent, we have been able to establish a peer support system, grow our employment, and also establish more clientele to be able to help individuals, Spanish speaking and non-Spanish speaking, to get them off the streets and in sober living, and also with the grants of measurable intent. And so I'm not aware of every nonprofit or other companies, but I can tell you from my end that that's how we've been helping others. Yeah.
Thank you, Alberto. Chief, could you take a couple more questions off your list, and then we have some board members that have questions.
For sure. Let me just see if I can find something a couple of these that maybe is higher level.
And those were all mixed questions from the community.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if they were all just one person that was really had a lot of energy, or if this was a accumulation of some stuff. How about if I address this? When we had you may have seen in the paper, we had an officer. The question is, how is the officer credibly accused of DUI been handled? And the reason I'm going to stop at this question and take a moment is because I know that it made the media, and I know that you should hold our police officers to the highest of standards. So we have two things that are happening here. One is you have a criminal investigation that is occurred and is occurring to include complementary prosecution, just like anybody that might be stopped for DUI. In this particular case, it was a DUI crash. And so there's some other nuances around the criminality of that. So that's happening, and that's happening on one path. The second path is administratively, and that happens internally to our organization with the IA process, with the independent police auditor, drafting allegations around policy violations and subsequent discipline action as a result of that. Sometimes those things can happen concurrently. Sometimes you wait for the criminal to take shape and be done until you start the administrative. But where I would say is it's in process of being handled according to our policies, procedures, and consistently with how we've handled other similar types of cases And then the criminal side is certainly happens outside of our organization, and that will take its own path. And that's afforded, that due process is afforded that individual just like it's afforded any of us that are accused of criminal behavior. So that's that one. So number 9, which I think I already answered when I was talking to Travis, but I'll just read the question. It's what is your stance and belief about persons in mental health crisis and the common armed police response to such individuals? I think answering that question for Travis, we're trying to pull back from some of that. The caveat that I would say is sometimes mental health crisis also creates a significant safety issue for the community, public, or people that are in close proximity. Not all mental health crises are the same, as you can imagine. They have varying degrees of severity and safety related issues, armed versus unarmed, those types of things. We do have a very, very skilled crisis negotiation team that allows us to deploy officers that are that can also be mindful of safety and have certain strategies, tactics, and tools around safety, but also approaching with a deep understanding and training around negotiation tactics to be able to safely, use our words and safely resolve those things. In other cases, there may be an armed police response in the early stages if it warrants that because of safety related issues. And the moment we're able to de-escalate that or render it safe, we're happy to hand that off. And there has been instances where we have arrived and have done that and been able to hand that off to cahoots or have them stand by and hopeful to be able to hand that off so that they can finish up with that call. And it's gone the other way a few times where cahoots arrives and it becomes a little bit more dangerous than they thought, or it escalates out of control and they even needed us to come in and they do the one handoff to us and then we try to stabilize the situation. So that's another one of those questions. So there's a couple, Thea, that I answered off this list that you have. And so why don't I kick it back to you? And it sounds like you have some board members.
We have a board member, Jen, who has a question for you.
Good evening, Chief Skinner. It's good to see you. You touched on pretty much a question that I had, which is what is the state of the EPD? And it sounds like it's just understaffed, and that says a lot. And I'm sad to hear that. But I was wondering do you see anything in any direction that is poignant or strong with the issue of the mentally ill who just don't have a chance out there? And it's not only in Eugene, it's all over the world. So, but I have to focus here in Eugene, and particularly Whitaker, because I lived here over 21 years as residents that live here. It takes a toll on you mentally. It chips away because you feel helpless, and they're right here every day in your face, and they are lost. And I wonder if there's any indication from the city, from the state, from anywhere that is going to truly address this extraordinary issue that has been kicked down the street for decades and decades. And that doesn't get brought up, the mental toll that it plays on people, in particular in the Whitaker, who have to deal with this issue, and you can't do anything about it. Anything positive that you can give? Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, for the question. I'm just going to be really honest with you. I'm not sure that I have around mental health investment. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to leave you with anything super hopeful. What I would say, though, is that oftentimes people believe mental health services are a city issue. And what I would say is that Lane County is in the mental health game, not the city. And so when you think about investment to do something different than what we've been doing for decades, which obviously isn't working, and notice that Oregon ranks, I think, dead last amongst our states in mental health investment. It's not hard to understand why we have so many people that are in crisis that don't have the services that they need. And so what I'll do is I will steal a phrase from our mayor, who put it really, really well. what we've established in the city is really the emergency room of trying to send cahoots or police or a crisis negotiator or crisis response team to our mental health issues. And what we have not done is build the hospital around the emergency room so that people can go someplace after they're initially triaged to go and get on a path to wellness. And that hospital that we need to build around our system is one that's going to take some concerted effort by the county, the state, and the federal government to reinvest in those mental health services. So, you know, on the local level, from the city's perspective, the things that we're focusing heavily on is trying to find the right number of social service providers to help get people stabilized. And then from that position, being able to figure out which services we might be able to connect them with. And some of those will be mental health services, but those are largely vetted through the county as the behavioral health portion of what we see here in the city of Eugene. So I think our commitment is to continue to try and stabilize people in Eugene. You see that with the safe sleep sites. You see that over and over and again talked about in the TAC report as being a strategy. We're trying to get some level of stabilized housing for those folks that are the most frequent users of the system, both our criminal justice system and our medical and healthcare system, and trying to get them stabilized. And so I think that's the commitment that we have is an ongoing investment to stabilizing people. But Jennifer, it's going to take a significant and intentional investment on behalf of the county, state, and the federal government if we're going to change the trajectory of mental health services for these people that you see in and around our community.
So can I ask? Yeah,
Jennifer, we have other people that are in the queue, so
Okay.
I'll put you back in the queue, okay?
Okay,
We
thank
want to
you.
get our community members first. I'll get you back in the queue.
Okay.
Celeste, you're up next.
Hello. I don't know if you guys can see or hear me. I don't know where I am in the call. There we go. So my question kind of revolves around rates of incarceration in Eugene. You know, generally how our police departments work, as most people kind of assume a crime gets committed, a call gets made, a police officer shows up, and it usually ends up in incarceration or whatever measures are deemed necessary to resolve the issue, right? But we also know that through years and years of research across the board, incarceration tends to increase recidivism rates, right? Which goes against the goal of reducing criminality in our community. So my question is, are there any future initiatives or plans or goals revolved around reducing rates of incarceration in our community and potentially redistributing resources from the police department into intervention programs that would go to preventing crime at kind of like a first base level, whether that be going into different educational programs, intervention programs with youth who are at risk, just generally reducing risk factors in our community members that tend to lead them to committing a crime in the first place. So that way they do not have to get incarcerated, which would increase their risk of recidivism.
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot to that because you're talking about the entirety of the criminal justice system, not just policing. You're talking about prevention, intervention, enforcement, the court system, our corrections system, parole and probation, juvenile. I mean, you're talking about a lot of that. What I would say is that it's been my experience in Eugene is that we incarcerate people at a lower rate than any jurisdiction I've ever been a part of. And that's largely because we think about the types of crimes people are committing. Now, certainly there's a couple of different paths here. One is the circuit court path, which is our felony crimes. And some of our felony crimes, as you can imagine, are people that potentially should be incarcerated. And I've always felt like, hey, we shouldn't probably, jail isn't necessary for the people that were, jail should be the people that we're afraid of, not the people that make us angry. Just because you do something that we don't like doesn't necessarily mean jail is a good option for you. So if we're mad at you, jail isn't necessarily a good spot. But if we're afraid of you because of your behavior and it's significant, then jail may be, incarceration may be the right path. But in Eugene, really where the majority of our issues are is in the kind of livability type crimes or the lower classification of crimes that are misdemeanors that don't go through our circuit court and oftentimes don't result in jail time. They result in some other type of diversion program to include, and I'll just at this point take an opportunity to talk about our community court and how it's had some great success with its recidivism rate. When we cite people into our community court and people have agreed to go to community court and avail themselves of the services that we're trying to offer, whether it's certain assistance and or intervention prevention services, that those providers that are in the room on those court dates have had a great amount of success in reducing the recidivism of those people that we originally cited. And that's not a custody arrest. That's not a you're in the back of the patrol car, you go to jail type thing. That's just a citation, as if you've got it's the same citation, quite frankly, that our traffic citations are written on. But it does cite you in the community court, and it gives us a chance to do that, much like with veterans court, drug court, mental health court, all of those types of teen court, all of those types of diversion courts or restorative justice type model courts are really important to diverting people from jail. The last thing I would say in this is that we're really, really leaning in and hopeful around the funding of a crisis center, which is an alternative to jail. So people that are suffering from some kind of a behavioral health issue or mental health crisis that commit crimes, which oftentimes happens, unfortunately, that we recognize that jail is not the best place for those people. And so we need to create a space that a patrol officer that's trying to deal with criminal behavior and comes across an individual that's eligible has a place to go other than the jail with that particular custody. And so a crisis center makes perfect sense when you think about doing that, because again, we can get the types of services needed for that individual. And I think once those folks are stabilized and get those services, that also has a positive impact on our recidivism rate. And so we're thinking about all of those things and investing in all of those things, both in the city and in partnership with the county, especially in the crisis center. We think about all of those things, but there on any given day for our lower level crimes in this city, we only have 15 beds available at the Lane County Jail. And we constantly are evaluating, making sure the right people are the people that should be in jail are in jail for the right reasons based on a judge's kind of decision-making matrix, and others are not. They're in some level of diversion, and hopefully we can resolve that through other ways other than incarceration.
Totally. So do you have any like specific answers on where those funds are going to come from and exactly like how you guys are going to move forward with that crisis center? Because that seems incredibly important. So I'm just curious as to like when that is going to be implemented and like how far along in the planning process, and if that's going to be coming from the police department budget or if that's going to be coming out of taxpayer dollars.
There's a variety of funding options for that. Some of that is grant funding, some of that is city funding, some of that is county funding. It's really a partnership in the sense that you're looking at a multi-million-dollar type of endeavor. There may even be some federal dollars associated with that. So anytime you're going down the path of trying to do something different and unique in your community, there's no one person that's going to be able to fund the entire thing. And so we look at the stakeholders that are going to benefit from this, and we're all at the table trying to figure out ways that we can fund that. And as important as a project as it is, it's, you know, we're all struggling right now trying to get our arms wrapped around our budget and deficits in all of our budgets as a result of COVID and revenues being down. And we also have a very unique opportunity with ARPA money, which is the American Rescue Plan Act money from the federal government, to be able to make some one-time investments in things like a crisis center or other things. I know that some of our ARPA dollars that we have in this next year's budget is specifically addressing homeless and the standing up of safe sleep sites. So we have the ability to make some one-time investments around some capital projects, unlike any time we have before. And so I can't dictate how the county spends their money. I certainly have some input on how we spend city money, but it is definitely many stakeholders at the table trying to share the costs on these types of things.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you, Celeste. Chief, we have a question from one of our board members, Gail.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to harken back to the question that Stephen asked earlier regarding the drone use. You mentioned that one of the uses that the police department uses the drone for is to monitor potential crime scenes. And I'm curious, who determines what constitutes a potential crime scene? What's the decision making matrix for that? Do you obtain warrants before flying over potential crime scenes, and or do you require, or do you seek permission for homeowners or property owners? I'm concerned that this feels like a big loophole, and I would like to know where the kind of the boundaries are on that. Who's making these decisions, and what's keeping them from just being
Yeah.
people flying over and snooping?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and certainly one that I know that would concern people. It's been my experience up to this point that when I say crime scenes, it has been significant major crime scenes, like for instance, a homicide scene. We've also flown. Is that not the direction you wanted to go with this?
You specifically said that you flew drones over potential crime scenes. So not, you also said that you do to monitor, to get information about existing crime scenes,
Right.
but you specifically used the terminology
Okay.
future crime scenes, and I think I wrote you down correctly.
I think what I said is that we can't fly a drone until a crime is committed. That's part of that. That's one of the things that we can do. One of the really good examples of that I think has gotten a lot of attention is we utilized the drones a ton during the summer when we had our protests happening for a couple of different reasons. One of those reasons is to monitor the direction of the group so that we could do some abatement with some traffic. Where we had some conflicts with cross traffic in these groups that kind of took to the streets and that were marching. And so that was super helpful. The other piece of that was also to monitor group activity, because we were seeing many of our businesses being vandalized, windows broken, graffiti, and those types of things. And so it allowed us to understand where some of the splinter groups were that were engaging in criminal activity and not part of the peaceful part of the protest, and those that just wanted to be heard. And so the drones were helpful with that. So when I think about future crimes, I would say that for instance, if we have a group that has a propensity to create violence or to be violent or destructive, we'll just say in our downtown core, because that's where we saw most of the activity, we would potentially use drones to keep an eye on that team or on that group of individuals as we're doing that. So that's all in public open space. And so we're not flying drones in people's backyards. We're not seeing criminal activity, potential or future criminal activity in people's backyards where there's a expectation of privacy. What we're talking about almost in every instance is public open space. And then the other piece around that could feel a little bit more intrusive is if we had a major crime occurred and we needed to map that as a crime scene. In general, that there's still some open public or open space that has an open space doctrine that we can do, but in the event that we needed to do something that was more intrusive, yes, we would write search warrants for that. But that's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Margaret, you are up next.
Good evening, Chief. Thanks for coming. I just have a quick question. So I read in the paper, pardon me, about Trillium putting some funds towards Cahoots. And I know from working in the public safety industry myself that a lot of times, for instance, let's just say right here in Eugene, part of what caused Eugene Springfield fire to join together, at one time one was Eugene and one was Springfield, was because I believe AMR or something tried to come in, a private ambulance tried to come in and put in a bid to take over the territory, which in my experience, you get, that it goes to the cheapest bidder and you get service that is not as great. And then it ends up to be more of a corporate thing than it does public. And right now, Cahoots is a public entity who can't even cover the people that they have. They're behind in their calls. And in the article that I read, Trillium is going to give them $200,000 a year to work with Trillium, people that have Trillium insurance, which kind of sounds like the same thing to me. So if you could clarify what that means exactly, I would appreciate that.
Well, I'd love to be able to meet your needs here. Trust me. But I'm also not bashful to let you know when I don't have the answer to that question. What I do know though is, like any social service provider, to be able to keep kind of the lights on, they solicit, funds from a variety of different sources. The city of Eugene has a specific contract with Cahoots that's just shy of $1 million, plus other add-ons, that really the total investment's closer to 1.5 when you add everything up, specifically for what we're asking them to do. The Trillium piece I'm not aware of, but one of the things that I know that we're paying attention to though is to what extent Cahoots is perceived as an ambulance service. When you think about anybody that are loading up and driving to a healthcare facility, and how we can be a little bit more creative with fire and EMS services to be able to provide a more, as our interim chief would call, a single role type of resource, where it's kind of a lower acuity response to some of these calls to be able to do that.
I know, Chris.
Yeah, well, we have our interim chief is Scott Cockrum, who is from California and most recently from Linwood, Washington. I believe it's Linwood, and he's holding down the fort, and he's taken a look at how we're moving forward with some of this stuff. So I think there's going to be some really creative things that come out of that. But specifically about the role with Trillium, I'm not going to be able to. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. But one of those things I can punt to somebody that may know that. And another one of those that we can get back through Thea, I can get that information back to you.
That would be great. And you understand my concern, correct? That
Sure.
Makes sense.
Sure.
So Chris
Totally.
is no longer the interim chief?
No, he fell back.
Margaret.
I'll just finish up with Margaret. Yeah, Chris moved back to his role where he came from, and we brought in an interim chief, and we're evaluating some of the path forward for both Eugene and Springfield Fire.
Thank you for your time.
You bet.
Ian's going to ask the next question, but I do want to remind, if you haven't sent Claire Roth, Claire, wave for us. If you haven't sent her your information in the private chat, and the chat's at the bottom of the screen, she would really appreciate it. And Ian, it is your turn.
Hey, Chief, thank you so much for coming tonight. And I really want to just say thanks again for fielding some tough questions and some questions that you think are disrespectful. We have folks in our community that have sentiments ranging from we should abolish the police to we need to hire more police and have them in the Whitaker. So I appreciate the willingness to have an uncensored dialogue and to read the questions as written. We've been making sure that a lot of community voices are heard through this process. My question for you is regarding the use of policing tactics that disincentivize antisocial behavior, as well as the potential to use tactics that increase pro-social behavior. So we've been doing a project, the Whitaker Community Council, based on a conversation with one of your lieutenants, Lieutenant Mozan. He came to a previous Whitaker Community Council meeting to talk about the Guardian trailers, and we've been thinking a lot about policing and public safety in our community. And so, just as a primer, I don't know about police policy, but we wanted to ask a question, the Whitaker Community Art Team and I, about the Guardian trailers. So for those of you who haven't seen them in the community, they are mobile surveillance systems. And I'm probably coloring outside the lines, Chief, so please verbally slap me on the wrist once I'm done, that act as a deterrent for antisocial behavior. And we have them sometimes at the request of business owners, and sometimes in areas where there are high instances of police calls for service. They have the capacity to be able to stream data, and they're mobile by design. They have solar panels on some of them and video cameras that go up this tower. And so the way that Lieutenant Mozan explained it when he came to the Whitaker Community Council is that they're designed to disincentivize antisocial behavior. So it's kind of a push strategy, pushing bad actors farther away and making bad behavior less appealing. We at the Whitaker Community Art Team had a conversation with him about, well, what if we did the opposite? What if we incentivized pro-social behavior and pushed good people, or rather pulled good people closer? And so we looked to the folks in Seattle who built this bridge troll. And this bridge troll in Seattle was in what was formerly an open air kind of drug marketplace And now is this kind of living sculpture that has a huge community around it. You can see they placed a giant mask at the beginning of the pandemic on it. And it's really kind of transformed this area of the community that was once avoided into a place where loads of tourists come to the Fremont Bridge Stroll. And so we kind of been thinking and iterating, how can we incentivize pro-social behavior in areas where maybe there's a lot of instances of property crime or calls for police service, really using a pull strategy to pull good actors closer and make good behavior more appealing. And so we developed this. It's called A Call for Our Future. And what it is it's a mobile art installation that's designed to be interactive. It has a phone line that you can call. Shout out to Jeff Althouse, one of our neighbors. He's on this call. He's the CEO and founder of Oakshire, where the installation is currently being kind of like beta tested, right? Because what we've done is we've partnered with another nonprofit organization called Word Crafters, and we're empowering people to call this phone line and describe the future that they want to see. 2 years from now, what is it going to look like? How are you going to be able to contribute to this world? And it also allows people to share a place-based story. So we're trying to think of ways to use this mobile art installation as a way to increase pro-social behavior to folks that are trying to come to an area. So my question for you is, are we thinking about the problem incorrectly? What we want to be able to do is create more mobile art installations to be able to increase pro-social behavior, but maybe we're missing something. Our art installation, costs about $3,000 to make. Money goes to local artists, and it costs about $600 each year to keep that phone line going. And so we're really keen to have more projects like this. We're going to be working with the folks from the World Track and Field Championship to be able to have it kind of outdoor tested during the games this summer. But I'm wondering if you can kind of gently guide us. Is our kind of hypothesis wrong? Can you use tactics to increase pro-social behavior just in the same way that you disincentivize antisocial behavior? Or are we kind of wrong in our thinking about the Guardian trailers entirely?
That's a great question. And before I answer that, I'll just reaffirm with you guys, and specifically with you, Ian, none of your questions that I fielded were disrespectful. This isn't about questions for me. This way out of bounds. So don't ever think that any questions that you've ever given me are not legitimate. Everybody has their own opinion and their own sense of importance in some things, and I will do my very best to always field questions that are happening. So that is what it is. To your point, I think those things need to happen concurrently. You can look at our downtown as a great example of that. Do we have people? Are there a lack of people downtown because there's not enough amenities to draw, or is there a lack of people downtown because they don't feel safe going there? And I think that you have to have a sense of safety or a perception of safety that has to concurrently exist as you incentivize people to activate space. It's not lost on us that the best way to do this is to activate space with the right people, whether it's your downtown core, whether it's the Whitaker, whether it's 5th Street Market or the new Riverfront property. The importance is to activate it with the right people, which means people that are there for commerce, people that are there for arts and culture, people that are there because that's their residence. It's important to activate those spaces with the right people. And we've learned that while we incentivize the right people to go to those places, that we have a better chance of attracting them if when they arrive, they feel a sense of safety, or at least perception of safety. And so I do think I think those things have to happen very collectively. There's kind of a cross-contamination of those two things that needs to occur, I think, to get optimal results. And so if you think about the right people that you want to be in some of these spaces, I would suggest that they're families, and families with kids and dogs and pets, and I mean, it's just a variety of people. And we have to be brutally honest with ourselves that there are some spaces that maybe statistically are not one of our highest crime areas or unsafe areas, but certainly feel that way. And that's what we're working on right now, specifically in the downtown, is some of the behaviors that feel that way. Nobody should ever be subjected walking down the street from one restaurant to another, or from their workplace of work to a car, should never be subjected to the types of comments and the types of behavior that people are subjected to in and around the downtown, and probably also in the Whitaker as well. And so I hear those stories every single week, and there's a part of my heart that dies every single time I hear from somebody that says, I don't feel safe in our community. So I think it's a joint venture when it comes to how we de-incentivize certain behaviors and create a sense of safety, and concurrently doing some things that will incentivize people to activate that space with the right types of behaviors.
Chief, is there a question on the email list? I know you're going to have to go here shortly. Jen did want to do a follow-up, but is there another question on there that you think you need to answer off of there? And if we have time, I'll ask one question after Jen.
Yeah. I mean, I have a tendency to be long-winded, and so I unintendedly.
Not you.
Well, I mean, I give Ian a run for his money, don't I?
I was going to put a timer on you.
If Ian and I decided to have a one-on-one conversation, we better block off a few hours. No, as I'm answering a bunch of these questions, it feels like there's been touch points with some of the stuff that I've seen. And of course, I'm not going to get through everybody's questions, and I apologize for that. But I feel if you want to ask a final question, that'd be great.
Jen's got a follow-up question. Then if I have time, I'd like to talk about the planter strips real quick. Because I think that ties right into Ian's. So Jen, can you make a quick question?
How about, go ahead, Thea, you're on.
All right, thanks, Jen. So you and I have talked, we have businesses that have planter strips, we have houses that have planter strips. And the question I constantly get from Chief Skinner when we go around is, does that person trespass someone? So can you explain that a little bit for everybody here? Sure. Because some people are allowing people to stay in their yards, because we have a lot of the people that are living in tents, they're our neighbors. They are our neighbors. But then we have the ones that aren't taking care of the trash, and they're preying on our neighbors. So can you talk about the differences?
Yeah, real quick. And since I'm kind of have the floor right before I have to scoot and do my dad duties, I just want anybody on this call to understand how important the relationship has been with Thea. She has been an amazing partner for me. It's just an amazing advocate for the Whitaker area. Most of you know that we oftentimes will get in the car together, masked, and drive around and look at certain areas, and I try to solve those pain points the best that I can. But just understand, you have a tremendous advocate and leader in Thea, and I appreciate her very much. The planter strips, essentially, the planter strips are yours. If you own a home, they're yours to maintain, and thus you have control over those. Same with businesses. So when we drive around and we see some of these tents and the planter strips, my first question is A, do we know about those? And B, has anybody come forward to be quote unquote a victim? Because you need a victim of trespass to be able to purposefully move and intentionally remove somebody. And so from time to time, we know the answer, and other times we're not sure. And there are times where people just get complacent, just say, I'm tired of dealing with this, I'm just going to let them stay there. And the unintended outcomes of that oftentimes is some of the survival behavior that goes along with being unhoused around some of the lower level criminal behavior that we see around car prowl, burglary, some thefts, copper wire thefts, those types of things, cutting a fence and going in, and those, and then not to mention the accumulation of stuff that can be really, really unsanitary for the neighborhood. And so what I would encourage people to do is to be good neighbors, and for you guys to do the outreach and ask businesses to call and ask us to remove them, or at least have a conversation with them. It may not be us, it may be outreach teams that go down and talk to those folks. And or if you're one of those people, just call and we'll do that. It's a very easy process. It very rarely, if ever, results in a custody arrest. Most people are happy to pack up and move on, and they'll find somewhere else. And we have a tendency to deal with the same individuals in different areas, but it's important that we don't not do anything and then just allow people to get so embedded and so territorial that it creates that public health issue and creates, in some cases, criminal behavior, and to be able to do that. And so the planting strips are yours as a resident and as a business. We need the authority to be able to trespass, and that falls squarely on the quote unquote victim's shoulders to do that. There's statutorily, there's some some burdens we have to meet before we can take action. And one of those is having the land or property owner involved.
Chief Skinner, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for the communication. I do have a couple people that are interested in talking to you about the traffic. So I will get you those emails. If anyone
Okay.
else has any further questions, I'm happy to pass them on. Any email, you can email the WCC, you can stick them in the chat and I'll write them down, send them to me directly, give me a call. And go have fun being a dad. Thank you very much. And thank you for the community to show out. This is, once again, you've brought the most number of people to our WCC meetings.
Well, thank you, Thea. And as always, I'm always available to you guys. And I don't want to feel defensive. I don't want to come off too defensive, but I do need to set some boundaries for myself. And you have access to me, Thea. Ian has access to me, maybe more than most. And you guys can always gang up on me anytime you need to.
Well, I feel personally attacked that you've called me out for being long-winded. So I'll cry on Holly's shoulder. That's a gross miscategorization. You can ask my ex-girlfriends. I'm like biblical. I'm biblical in my long-windedness. Thank you again, Chief. Just really appreciate your candor, your passion, and just being uncensored. Really appreciate you.
You bet.
Thank you.
You bet. We'll see you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thrilled for the conversation with the chief. Know we have a lot of folks who are asking about the recording that's going to be posted later tonight. And thank you so much, Claire, for facilitating the conversation via the chat. Thank you so much, Thea, for facilitating and moderating the conversation with the chief. And any of those of you who do have questions for the chief that were not answered tonight, feel free to reach out directly to Thea. She just put her email in the contact. Thea has graciously acted as the public safety liaison with the chief of police for many years now, both on and off of the board. And we really, really appreciate all her service to the community. Thea, go ahead.
So I will tell you, this started way back when Chief Kearns was the head of our police department. And it started with getting us bike patrols in our neighborhood to help us so that we could have more safety on our bike paths and in our parks. And so when Chief Skinner did come to town, I was able to be on the community portion of his interview team. And the first thing I did after the city hired him is I went to him and said, please don't take our bike patrols away. And you need to give the Whitaker some love for everyone that lives here. And so we've had lots of conversations, and he's very open and he listens when I talk to him. And he takes all of your comments to heart. So there are a lot of people that are interested in the traffic. So if you could email me and just put traffic on it, I'll put them all together and I'll see if I can get you folks all together with Chief Skinner here in the near future. Thank you again. We live in an amazing neighborhood. You people are awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Thea. And the next part of our conversation is really just that. It's an open-ended dialogue about having hybrid meetings and going back to in-person meetings. And I'm hoping that board members and community members, particularly those of you who are either studying how to be able to have public meetings in school, or maybe are a part of organizations that already do hybrid meetings or in-person meetings, really take an active role in sharing your lived experience, the context that informs it, and also some of the pitfalls and benefits of doing it. We at the WCC have tried hybrid meetings in the past and really have seen kind of the worst of both worlds. We're excited for the ability to be able to have in-person meetings again that really prioritize inclusion, equity, and public health. The reason that we've pivoted to an online format is to ensure not only that we're compliant with Governor's Stay Home, Save Lives order, but also so folks who are working parents, folks who have jobs right now are able to participate in ways that they want. But I really wanted to open it up to the community and hear from y'all. What are your thoughts about hybrid meetings? What are your thoughts about in-person meetings? We'll of course take our guidance from public health, but we really wanted to hear from you. What are some of the ways that you've seen hybrid meetings be successful or in-person meetings be successful during the time of COVID that really prioritize equity and inclusion? And I see we have Alberto first on the queue, and I'll be typing up in the chat the queue to speak. Alberto, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's nice to have these kind of meetings in a hybrid mode, simply because, you know, we're able to reach out to multiple people right on the platform, which is really nice to have. And I know from experience that someone who kind of runs psychoeducational groups for drug and alcohol, it's not easy to do on Zoom, but it's definitely like a way to reach out to everybody or the majority. So that's nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Kim, we'll go to you next. I'm getting some feedback in the chat, and Jeff or Travis, feel free to chime in after Kim. From Jeff, online meetings increase access to more citizens. They're safe and effective. I'd agree with that, and Travis does as well. So Kim, we'll go to you next, and then Alberto, you are right after Kim. Kim?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I live at the East Blair Housing Cooperative. Can you hear me okay? We have folks here who really don't like Zoom or just won't use it, and then they gather in our community room, and then so that's, or outside if it's nice weather, which is really bad because the trains and the kids and the dogs. But even in the community room, here's a pitfall. There's a lot of side talk, because if the facilitator is, even if the facilitator is in the person to person, people just tend to talk like they would, you know, like you have to repeat everything, right? Like, oh, so-and-so just said this. You have to repeat everything for the people on Zoom who couldn't hear. And then various devices, people have their different devices. So there's all this like feedback and telling people to mute, and one speaker and a Bluetooth. And I don't know, maybe it's just us and we're all Luddites, and I don't know, just can't figure that piece out, but we haven't. And yeah, so that is, I don't know if that answered your question, but I think we are going to be in the same position when we are allowed to meet again. There are going to be people who still want to do Zoom. So we're going to have to figure out the hybrid thing as well. Check.
Thank you so much, Kim. We've got Susan up next, and then Dan is after Susan, and then I'm on deck after Dan. Susan?
Yeah. Hi. Okay, I've been attending 12-step meetings during COVID, and I go to a Al-Anon meeting on Sundays. I've been going to a meeting in LA for a couple of years, and the part that that I think is the most important is to get the technology down. The way that the way that it's set up in this meeting is they have a meeting space that they have somebody that goes kind of in a booth kind of arrangement with masks, with a mask. And right now they wear a mask. Everybody wears masks in the in-person meeting. And they have a camera on the person that's speaking at a podium, of course, and then they have a camera that you can see the whole room at the same time. And then that's in the Zoom with all the people that are coming, not at the in person. And in the beginning, there was a little bit of bumpiness about getting the technology correct. And the biggest issue seems to be the sound when they're doing it at the podium and then switching to the Zoom, because sometimes there's some kind of sound thing that happens with Zoom. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I noticed that there was kind of a bumpy part, and that they have one person that's in charge of setting that whole meeting hybrid thing up, a technology person. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Susan. Dan, you are up next.
I sort of wanted to just respond to what Kim was talking about. because our meetings that we do on Zoom are so well run and well organized and respectful, that to have in-person meetings, which I think is really where we should be going. I mean, you know, the Zoom component's great for people that don't want to, you know, be in a room with other people. But as long as the ground rules are laid out clearly, I don't think it should be an issue that, you know, mute your devices and you pretend you have a mute button on yourself when it's not your turn to speak and go in turn, all that kind of stuff. I know that's asking a lot of you Luddites and everyone else, but yeah, I mean, I can't wait to be in a room with people, even if I have to be 6, 8, 10 feet away from everyone. It'll still be, I think, a sense of reality about the proceedings that you don't get, or at least a little layer of it that you don't get on Zoom. That's all I have to say.
Stephen, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I was thinking back to that one hybrid meeting that the Whitaker had. I believe the in-person part was in Alluvium at the time. And when Susan was speaking, it gave me a sense of deja vu, because what Susan was describing was, I think, what the Whitaker ran into at that first attempt at the hybrid meeting. And I suspect if you had if we can find a really good technical person to talk us through moving from where we were then to the next stage, I'm really keen on being able to do hybrid meetings. I have not yet, unlike Susan, I have not yet participated in any hybrid meeting within any organization, and I go to a lot of Zoom meetings with quite a few different organizations. None of them have figured out how to do Zoom meetings, so it would be quite an achievement if we can figure out how to do hybrid right.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much, Stephen. I haven't finished typing, but Kim is first, then Margaret, and then Jen. Kim?
Oh yeah, I had a question about this 2 cameras thing. Okay, for Susan, like, so there's 2 cameras simultaneous, like, right? One at the facilitator and then one at the in-person audience. And then do they speak, like whoever's speaking have to come up to the podium to speak? Because
Yes.
like, okay. And then okay, and my question for everyone really is, do you think that there would be like, do you think it could work to have co-facilitators, like one on, yeah, I don't know, like maybe, yeah, more than one facilitator. I don't know.
Actually, that they do. They have a
Oh, okay.
facilitator on site and they have a Zoom facilitator. So they have people in both realms. I'm glad you asked that question. I'd forgotten about that piece.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Have,
Thanks.
and
Thank you.
and the facilitator controls the mic in the real room, in the room where people are actually present.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kim, and Susan too. Really appreciating the dynamism of this conversation. And I'm going to send it to Margaret next, and then Jen. Margaret?
I have 2 real quick questions. Number 1, I know that Angie was working on the technology have meetings in person. Do you know, is that still in play?
So I wasn't going to spoil the surprise, but at the end of Jen's comments, I'm going to show you a technology package that Angie scoped, who was our previous secretary, who's taking a leave of absence. But yeah, I wanted to share that with the group and then kind of get some live dynamic feedback from the group about a potential solution that the board has been exploring for in-person meetings.
And then just one comment, although I think right now it's too early to have in-person meetings, take that from a personal perspective. It's not the safest place in the world out there. But as time goes by and as things loosen up, which I think that they will, as a community council, I know that there's many people in the neighborhood that want to go back to in-person meetings and that are not attending because they can't attend in person. And we owe it to our community to offer both so that we have the highest attendance possible when it's safe. So, thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. There's a lot to unpack there, and I want to showcase technology piece of it, but also have a conversation about when it's safe, because that is super dynamic and I think would change from person to person. But I don't want to take away from Jen's time. Jen, you're up next, and then I have a comment unless a member of the public wants to comment first. Jen?
Yes, thank you. And so, as I understand that Angie wasn't able, she had not purchased the material yet we were hoping to get. And I think that this would be a good time to really consider perhaps having a committee to work on that issue, because we are going to end up going hybrid, and we can do our preparation so that we're ready. But first got to find a place that is welcoming and has good ventilation and space. And we don't have that yet. We have a lot of homework to do on that matter, so we can do this. And acoustics plays a big part of it. And if we do raise a committee, I would like to be a part of that committee as well. But it has to be as well run as the Zoom meetings are. I really, like Dan said, they are managed well. And that is, anyway, part of that whole thing is we have the time to prepare ourselves, because eventually we're going to go there, and this would be the time to jump on it. That's my input.
would like to be in person. And so I'm wondering if we could not encourage those people, if they have people in their pod that want to attend, is that we make sure that they're able to do that and be a part of our Zoom community until we can get in person. So to encourage some of those spaces. And I don't know if one of our restaurants in town would like to be a possible room that people could use as a possibility, or even a place at the Mission. So just the possibility there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thea. And I knew that we were not long for the Zoom meeting crashing once someone said it's run super well. So I blame you, Zoom audience, for praising our technology prowess. Margaret, I see your hand up, and I'm going to showcase some potential solutions. Do you have a follow-up to Thea or anyone else's questions?
Yeah, just to Thea, just myself personally, just chatting with people. Like I talked to Jamie at Ninkasi, and they have a whole third floor, a whole huge room in the third floor. He told me that he would be more than happy to host a meeting there. I know that we would be welcome at the hybrid where we did the one clinic. And what's nice about that is the weather gets better, it's outside. You know, there are various locations that we could host meetings throughout the neighborhood. It wouldn't all just have to be in the school. And it would be nice to move around a little bit, I think, and showcase some of our businesses.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who's participating. And if you haven't participated, but you have some ideas, we would love to hear from you. I know there's some University of Oregon students. I don't want to call you out, any of you individually, who are learning how to facilitate meetings. So really would appreciate if any of you have some words of wisdom to share with us. We learn best from others, and we really encourage you to participate. So what I'd like to share with you next are some technology solutions that were shared with us by members of the IT community of the University of Oregon. So our former secretary and I worked for many months to explore a set of technology, like a suite of technology solutions for when this happened. You can think of it as the proverbial sword in the stone. We put it there for when the chosen one would come and pull it out when our COVID numbers dip down. And we're looking like we're getting very close. Governor Brown, I don't know if you've seen recently said that the statewide mask mandate will, I believe, be lifted on March the 31st. So take that as you will. I think that as an organization that really prioritizes health equity, and we know that the poorest amongst us, those who are unhoused, those who are from historically marginalized communities, Latinx, African American, indigenous groups are disproportionately impacted by COVID. So I think that as a board, we should have conversations around which best practices we're promoting at our meetings. But what I wanted to do is first share with you the suite of technology solutions that were recommended to us by the IT professional, internet technology, information technology professionals at the University of Oregon, and then talk about when we would have in-person meetings, because I think that's pretty dynamic too. What the state of Oregon says might be different from what Lane County Public Health says, what may be different from the Whitaker Community Council says. And I, for one, have been super confused sometimes when the CDC says one thing and then Oregon Health Authority says something different. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that have been recommended to us by IT professionals, and then from there have a conversation around what we envisioned initially for a room based on the conversations we've been having tonight, as well as conversations from others. So can folks see the screen right now? It should be Logitech. This is your U-shaped table room. Okay, we're getting some thumbs up. So Logitech, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of technology infrastructure company. They produce things from keyboards, mouses, but they've really come to prominence over the last year around solutions for video conferencing. So you can see the technologies, the suite of solutions that they recommended to us was this solution for PC-based Zoom rooms that were large. And so I know that it might kind of go into some jargony tech stuff, but I'll just kind of get into brass tacks here. What they recommended to us based on our needs and the conversations with the IT consultants who do this a lot at the University of Oregon is they suggested 3 different microphones that we would place at different parts of the room. And this would allow people at home to kind of hear the room, right? So if you were in different parts of the room, you would kind of be able to hear conversations that are going on in different parts of the room if people didn't want to go up to a podium. If they wanted to ask their question from sitting down, we would ask people in the physical room, not the virtual room that we're in right now, to be quiet, kind of like mute themselves in real life. A rally speaker connects to their setup, and so it would allow people in the room to hear what folks at home virtually are saying. So kind of there's a dynamic back and forth. The microphones allow people virtually to hear what's happening in the physical room, whereas the speakers allow the folks in the physical room to hear what's happening in the virtual world. A tap is a device which allows the kind of Zoom moderator, right? Because you would have to have a person on Zoom moderating the Zoom chat, and then you'd have to have a person in real life moderating the meeting room, which allows the kind of room, the virtual room, to be presented on these televisions. So what they also suggested is to have 2 televisions in the room, which would allow you to see the people's virtual faces. And they gave some suggestions as you can have stands or you can bolt them into the wall. So basically the kind of technology solutions that they recommended were microphones, speakers, this device which allows you in real life to control aspects of the Zoom meeting, and then ways for you to be able to mount televisions so that people could see the virtual room in real life. And so I wanted to share that first because this came from IT professionals at the University of Oregon who have a lot of experience hosting hybrid meetings, have a lot of experience hosting virtual meetings, and I think would give us the capacity to have both an effective virtual meeting and physical meeting at the same time. It would be a lot of work. And I'll just put this out there. We're probably going to belly flop our first time, our second time, even our third time. But I think that the way that we would effectively do it is have 2, maybe even 3 moderators, a moderator for in-person, a moderator on the virtual side from home, and then maybe a moderator who's doing kind of both, has that kind of like handheld device, and they're kind of administering the tech side of things in person, so that the sound's right, so that people are seeing the virtual meeting in the background, and you don't have one person doing too many things. So I want to have a conversation too about missed price. So that was from Linda. So this doesn't come cheap. The whole suite is anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000. The Whitaker Community Council is a nonprofit organization, so we have a modest amount of grant funding that could be able to cover this. And we looked at a range of technology solutions, everywhere from the low end to like $1,000 to the high end, which was like more than $10,000, which we really thought of as a budget. And so I want to go to Jen next, but I also want to have a conversation around what constitutes safety, because I think that when we have a in-person meeting is going to vary for a lot of people, and there may be members of our community who never feel safe having an in-person meeting if COVID numbers are at a certain place. So I wanted to pivot to Jen next before we have a open conversation around what makes for a safe meeting and when we would have an in-person meeting. Jen?
Yes, thank you. So does this package include addressing acoustics? Because that's going to be a pretty important part if you have echoes, which can very well be the case. And also, what is your thought? I don't know if you heard me or not, ask whether we should form a committee to address this, since I believe we have time before we are willing to go into in-person meetings. I know I'm not. And I'm sure a lot of people are, but we have this ability right now, an advantage to deal with this issue and form a committee and address all the issues involved with it. And we can have a rehearsals.
Yeah, for the acoustic piece, I think, Jen, we can't advocate for your opera singing career. I know the reason that you really asked that question is because you want to sing to the group. No, I think acoustics vary from room to room. I really don't know much about that, but I'd have to ask an IT person. For the committee piece, I think we should probably punt that to the board of directors meeting next week and just have a deeper conversation around if we need a committee or not. Kim?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's somebody or whoever recommended this, like if there's some sort of meeting, open meeting week, someone could attend to like hear it, see how it works. Like I know I do a lot of country fair meetings, and they have two monitors, and they do breakout rooms, and they're doing the hybrid, and they seem to do it well. So I don't know what they have going on. Maybe they have that thing, I can ask around. But yeah, it'd be nice to kind of check it out, like, like window shop before you buy, like,
Totally. Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. And I'll try to grab an IT professional from U of O who recommended this suite to us to the board meeting next week. And I'll also extend the invitation. Kim, I sent you a message on Facebook as well, just to connect with you on the hybrid meeting stuff. So would love to have the East Blair Housing Co-op, because I feel like we can learn together and maybe have some of the country fair fam consult us as well, because I'm sure they have a unique perspective. Alberto?
Yeah, as a U of O student, being in a class, sometimes class sizes of like up to 100 students or 60, things like that. I understand that this group meeting seems to be a little bit shorter, but still within the range of close to 20, I assume, looks like, or a little bit more. And so even then, like when we're in a class size like that and using microphones and all that, technology is still like an iffy thing. And so I would highly suggest like still kind of thinking and looking and testing before purchasing, because honestly, like the microphones they use in the class, sometimes it doesn't echo, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's half off, sometimes the microphone's connected to the Zoom meeting and then it's still not like interpreted very well in the Zoom meeting while in the classroom. And so that's the tough part about hybrid for sure.
Thank you so much for that, Alberto. I'm also a student of U of O, and I would just, totally share that. I think that try before you buy, and that just remember too that things go wrong always. Even when there is in-person meetings, things go off the rails. And so I wanted to share with y'all, and we have 5 minutes left before we talk about upcoming agendas, is just what our current COVID numbers are. And good news is our numbers are going down. So this is from Lane County Public Health. They use a service called Tableau, and it's a data visualization service which empowers folks to be able to see not in real time, but on a daily basis, where our COVID numbers are and how they're trending. So I wanted to share this with everyone because I think what's been poorly communicated by public health is when something is safe to do. And whatever we as a board decide to do, and by the way, just so our kind of decision-making process is laid bare, our board of directors is elected by you, the community that we represent. So it's either folks who live, work, or own property in the neighborhood, like Gail said, who are elected to the board of directors to make decisions on behalf of the community. So our board needs a simple majority, in many cases, sometimes a 2/3 vote in order to make decisions. So whatever decision we come to is going to be by consensus at a board of directors meeting or via email. But I think that I wanted to have a conversation with the community too. I know that 5 minutes isn't a ton of time. Just what constitutes a safe barrier? I think like a safe threshold rather for holding in-person meetings. I think ultimately we should ask Lane County Public Health and let the experts tell us when safe. But I'm interested too what I see some folks in the community laughing. So I just wanted to ask y'all, what do you think as a threshold for when is it safe to hold a public meeting in a hybrid format or completely in person? And I see Steven's hand up and then Jeff's. Steve?
Yeah, right now the numbers are very, very volatile. I get drilled down to the zip code level, and last week was less than half what the numbers were 2 weeks prior to that. However, the numbers are still 1.5 times what they were at the peak of the Delta variant. So it's wild times, and I haven't seen the numbers that volatile since I've been following them since the beginning of the pandemic. So how they look today could be very different from how they look from a week from now. And so we need to watch very closely to see how the situation is changing, rather than make firm plans based on the last few weeks because of the volatility.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. And I think talking to our colleagues at Oregon Health Authority and Lane County Public Health can give us a deeper sense too about what to expect in the coming weeks. Jeff, you're up next.
Yes, I'm just curious. I mean, we're having this conversation about when it's safe. I don't think we're all going to find agreement there, and I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense to walk down that road too far, because before COVID, it is safe for some people to go out of their home and not for others. It's not all going to be the same for all of us at any given time. So that's why I really support a hybrid model, because it increases access for people who can't safely leave their home, and allows folks that do want to meet in person to be able to meet in person. So I'm in full support of finding an excellent solution for a hybrid model, and I would be very opposed to eliminating this remote component being available for every meeting, because that would decrease access and it would make it so that folks who didn't feel safe going out for whatever reason, COVID or otherwise, wouldn't be able to participate.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jeff. And I'm seeing some agreement from Travis in the chat. And that's really why we wanted to kickstart the conversation. This is only the beginning of a decision-making process and a community engagement process on behalf of the board, because we really want to listen to the community and be able to make the best set of decisions from you. So like you've heard today, it's going to be a not insignificant amount of work for the board to be able to do an effective hybrid format. And we also want to be able to know that some rooms just don't have the right acoustics, right? We need to be able to be in a room and kind of user test it to make sure that we can have effective hybrid meetings. But I think what we're hearing tonight is that people do want the virtual component, and people want the in-person component as well if they choose to come to it. So we can definitely take that into consideration. Does anyone have any other comments or suggestions regarding when you think a reasonable threshold to have an in-person component of a general meeting or board meeting? And I see both Brad and Kim. I think I saw Kim's hand up first. So Kim first and then Brad. Kim? Kim, I think you are still muted.
Brad can go first.
Famous last words. Brad.
Okay, I just want to say a couple quick things. One, everything Jeff Aldhouse just said, I'm 100%. That was perfectly stated. But two, I would question whether following what the governor's and OHA is saying to do and what Lane County Health is saying to do is the best path forward. These are entities that have a almost 2-year track record of consistent failure based on a little too much hopium and not enough being pragmatic and precautionary. Let's bear in mind that the cell biology emerging from this thing is that mild infections can lead to long COVID. Mild infections cause damage of the brain just through inflammation at the site of the infection. Mild infections are activating human endogenous retroviruses. Mild infections are aging your T cell components a decade. I don't have that many decades left over. You know, we're already seeing increases in cancer rates, probably because of this. We should, I think, err towards being more precautionary and a little less hopium in this. But you know, people are going to do what people are going to do. But you know, so obviously, I'm going to say, yeah, we need to have a virtual component, or I won't be there. Anyway, thanks.
Great. So we have appreciate your perspective, Brad, and Kim. You're up next. And then
I'm going to say the opposite. Like, there's no right time for everyone. So, like, I don't know. At the co-op, we just follow like the mandates, right? So that we're not. We do like we have parties, gathering. You know how many? 12 people, however many. You know, whatever. And so we just follow the mandates and then let people choose if they feel safe, right? Like we can still, like the board or whomever can still like put out a statement saying, we recommend still virtual meetings, but if this is an option that's available to you. And it's just like the giving people autonomy and helping, you know, if they want to go, because there's not going to be any like time when we all feel good, like, right? Like there's no other barometer or litmus test, I think. Anyway, check.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. And I certainly didn't expect at the end of tonight that the board would have that perfect threshold, but we definitely wanted to kickstart the conversation tonight so we could have a more robust conversation next week during the board of directors meeting, which is of course open to the public as well. Andrew, I think you're going to have the last word tonight, and then after that, we're going to share our upcoming meeting schedule. Andrew?
Sure, yeah, I'll be brief because I can talk at the board meeting. I appreciate hearing from everyone. It sounds like there's a lot of energy to have hybrid meetings. I guess my major concern is just like who's facilitating that. And, you know, if people want to do that, that's great. But like, for instance, if the Whitaker Community Council was paying someone to do that, I think the situation might be differently. So I'm really looking forward, I think, to having a bigger conversation because you know, there's a lot of energy and I want to be inclusive of people. But I also, you know, I think there's a huge difference in the Whitaker Community Council putting something on, and right, like we can get technology, we could loan that out to people. Like there are a lot of different ways to make it possible. But you know, like I think Steven said, the cases right now are still much higher than they've ever been. And it makes me uncomfortable thinking about asking someone, for instance, if we were paying to take on a job that I personally wouldn't do for safety reasons. So we'll continue it next week, but I'm interested, I guess, in kind of what our options are. And, you know, if community members want to volunteer to do that and, you know, they're very interested in it, I think we can do a lot of things to help facilitate that and make that possible. So yeah, looking forward to next week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew and Kim. I followed up with you via Facebook, but I'm totally happy to do a phone call or do a walk. I really love the East Blair Housing Co-op and the interactions and history between the WCC and the East Blair Housing Co-op. Travis, you have a question not in this line of inquiry, and then we're going to end as close to 9 as we can. Travis?
Okay, sorry I haven't been able to make more meetings. I am curious as to what the most recent communications Whitaker Community Council has had with our ward counselor, Claire Surrett, and what she and Whitaker Community Council are doing to move forward in fixing some of these neighborhood issues that I believe most of us agree we're having. I've personally written to Claire and other counselors many, many times throughout COVID. I've watched all the city council meetings, and I can tell you in the last 6 months, there hasn't been much on city council meetings discussing our issues in the Whitaker. A lot of times they refer to downtown issues, but they're not talking about what's happening in our neighborhood. So I feel like we're not being represented. I could be wrong. For all I know, you guys are communicating with her all the time, but I don't really see her publicly advocating for the Whitaker at all of recent. And she promises me on her emails that she's working hard for our neighborhood, but whenever I watch council meetings, they're talking about a whole lot of things besides the crisis we're experiencing consistently for the past 2 years plus. You know, you could even say 10 years in the Whitaker neighborhood. So that's kind of that was kind of a loose question, but she's our Ward 7 city councilor, Claire Surratt.
It's a big question too. What I'll do is I'll invite Councilmember Surratt to our next general meeting to see if she's available for that. I have a follow-up for it, but Thea, I'm wondering if you could talk about your last, if you feel comfortable, your last conversation with Surratt, and I'm going to be meeting with her shortly, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Thea?
So I do text Claire Surratt regularly. I send her emails. I know that she has spoken up in a couple of the meetings, Travis, because I've talked with her about the compassion fatigue we're experiencing in the meeting, you know, here in the Whitaker. And I know she has mentioned that. And we just recently talked about what's going to happen with WJ and the people who choose not to go to the safe sleep sites and what's going to happen then. And so I've been in those conversations with her, and I was hoping she was going to make it tonight, but I know she has another meeting at the same time. So
you guys are actively engaged with, you're actively engaged with her.
Absolutely. She gets as many emails as Chief Skinner, and they often get CC'd along with all the other city employees.
Okay. Well, thank you. That puts me a little bit at ease. Yeah, I've watched
Travis,
every city council meeting and absolutely no mention of anything happening in the Whitaker for at least 4 months. And the last thing I heard her say was, my neighborhood would like their park back. That was about 6 months ago. Other than that, they talk about the riverfront complex. They talk about updates to downtown. They talk about safety in downtown. They don't publicly, they're kind of keeping us their dirty secret, and I'm getting pretty sick of it.
Yeah, and Travis, whenever you've brought a concern to me, I take it straight to her. I just don't let her know it's you. When people bring concerns, I say to the neighbor has brought this concern to me. I never say who the person is. So.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Travis. And we're gonna end in just a minute or two now. And I just wanted to kind of put a finer point on Thea. Anyone who wants to establish their own relationship with Councilmember Surratt, I would encourage them to reach out to Councilmember Surratt via email. I know that some of the folks here do. I meet with her about every month and a half. The next thing that I'm going to meet with her about is about the American Rescue Plan Act. So that's ARPA, that was referenced by the chief earlier. There's about $9 to $15 million, which the city of Eugene, I believe it's $15.9 million, which the city of Eugene has not allocated yet. And I'm going to be working with Councilmember Surratt to ensure that a portion of that funding goes back to the Whitaker. So I also want to kind of state to folks that we don't need to get action from the city in order to enfranchise our community and get the resources that we desperately need. You know, in the beginning of the presentation tonight, we talked about how the Whitaker Community Council, on behalf of our members, is working to get funding for our business community, vaccines for COVID, PPE, rapid tests, money for artists. And that's not with the blessing or permission of the city. We're doing that out of our own volition because what we're hearing from the membership is that this is a priority for our community. So I just wanted to state two things. One, we're going to continue to work with Councilmember Surratt. We're going to try to leverage community resources from the American Rescue Plan Act. And then three, like, we don't need permission from the city. We want to be able to get funding from federal, from state, from county grants to be able to do the projects that we so desperately need and be able to build capacity, not in antagonism of the city, but because we know that our community needs resources in an outsized way from other folks. So I see some hands up from folks. We're a little over time right now. So Margaret, I saw your hand up, and then Thea. Night Jeff, thanks so much for joining. We'll do one quick to Margaret, and then Thea, you'll have the last word. Margaret?
So just real quick. So last month I went to the Leaders Council meeting, which is that what it's called, Ian? The meeting where all the neighborhood councils go together.
Ah, yes.
So,
Neighborhood Leaders Council.
And I thought it was going to be a little different than it was, but just to answer your question a little bit, Travis, I will tell you that also the I'm not feeling real hot, but the Chamber of Commerce is putting together committees because they are tired of the city council not addressing what's happening to local businesses throughout Eugene. And they are looking for input from every single neighborhood, and they're going to take it in front of the council and say, look, we're tired of this. It's over. It's done. You guys are not doing your job. You need to fix this. It actually was a great meeting, and I heard lots of great things, and I think that they're going to step up and do something. And I don't always say that, but I think they really will.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Thea, you're going to grab the last word tonight before we end the meeting.
Oh, I just put it in the chat that I have reached out to the railroad to see if we can get our railroad cleaned up from all the garbage from the folks that were living there between Van Buren and all the way down to Monroe, I believe, maybe Madison. There's quite a bit of trash. So we're working on getting that cleaned up. So hopefully that'll happen. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Thea, and thank you everyone for joining. We have our board meeting at 7 p.m. on the 16th of February on the same Zoom address, which is open to the public. We have a March general meeting on the 9th, in which we're going to be talking about the elections, which are open to the public, but you need to live, work, or own property in the Whitaker in order to run for a seat on the board of directors or vote, and that's on the 13th of April. Thank you so much for everyone attending tonight and participating, and the recording of this will be up on our YouTube page by the end of tonight. Bye, everyone. Hope you have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.